to order. I will do a roll call for those in attendance. Give me 1 second. Stephen Crane, are you with us this morning?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. All right, when someone sees Stephen, give me a heads up. Jared Stanton?
Present.
Thank you, Jared. Matt Johnson?
Present.
Lori Hunter?
Present.
Justin Cameron?
Present.
John Harris?
Present.
Russ Hughes?
Present.
Kate Hanley?
Present.
Peter Fischelis? Peter with us? Maybe not yet. Court Booth?
Present.
Heather Bout?
Present.
Frank Cannon?
Present.
Chris Popov?
Present.
Charlie Parker? I thought I saw Charlie. Are you here?
I've seen him.
I see him.
Present.
We can't hear you, Charlie, and it doesn't look like you're muted, so maybe something's going on with your audio, but I see you. Hello. Matt Root?
Now?
Oh, yeah. Now we can hear you, Charlie. Thank you. You're present. Excellent.
Present.
Matt Root, thank you. Pat Nelson? Is she here? Hold on. I don't see her, but I have received an email from her this morning, so I know she's on her way. And Dawn Guariello, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. I want to call this meeting to order, and I wanted to ask if anyone would entertain a motion to move correspondence forward in the agenda today for two reasons. One, some of the information is pertinent to discussion later on the agenda, but also because we're so accommodating to our committee members. Heather needs to drop one of her children at school, and of course we're all sensitive to that these days. You can't really call, your friends for a ride safely, so she needs to step off video. She's still gonna listen, but I'm hopeful that for those reasons, someone might put forward a motion to move correspondence from item 9 ahead to item 2.
I would make that motion, please.
Thank you, Heather.
I will second. Stephen
It's
Crane,
excellent.
present.
Thank you, Stephen. Oh, and hey, good morning. Okay, so any discussion? Hearing none. Do I have to take a vote on that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It's early, it's Thursday, and I need to get my wits around me. Thank you. All right, so let's do a roll call motion. Stephen Crane,
Yes.
Jared Stanton,
Yes.
Matt Johnson,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
John Harris,
Yes.
Russ,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Peter.
Yes.
Good morning, Peter. Court,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Pat.
Yes.
Good morning, Pat. And myself, I'm a yes. So with that, I'll hand it over to Heather.
Awesome. Thank you, Dawn. Thanks for being accommodating. So we
We
do have a
try.
bunch of correspondence, and like you said, a lot of it is relevant to our discussions later. So I did want to get it out there up front. We had a total, not that it's huge numbers, but since our last meeting, we had a total of 13 emails on a variety of topics. They were all really well thought out and very relevant to our discussion. So I'm obviously not going to go into every one, but I'll tell you the topics. One was, we'll call sustainability, but really under that umbrella, it was about a healthy indoor environment and asking what we're doing to address that. These were all responded to, by the way. 5 of them were about the auditorium, and the specific comment in almost all cases was asking us to have an auditorium at least as large as the current one. 3 were about the gym, and again, 2 of them similar to the last ones, asking for 2 full-size courts, and the 3rd one specifically from CCYB, Concord Carlisle Youth Basketball, outlining the specs that they would really like to see. This came up from a request at the design subcommittee for them to send that. So that was in response to a request, very detailed and useful specs. So hopefully everybody's taken a look at that as well. There were 2 about potentially hardwiring and asking about the timing of when that would be discussed. One was related to the auditorium, but specifically about a chorus room. and asking if there could be a separate chorus room. One was about basically access to outdoors. It was making sure that the lower level classrooms weren't going to be windowless, and that of course has been addressed, that no, they won't, but also asking that we make sure we give students access to the outdoors. And two of them were about the project delivery, the design bid build versus CM at risk that we'll be talking about later. And I mentioned them specifically because they were both very detailed in their discussion of the advantages of each different types of project delivery, and both from residents who've been involved with large building projects here in town before. So just want to make sure everybody has read all of these. I'm sure you have, and we can take them into account in our discussions later. And thank you for your flexibility. I will be off camera for a little bit while I drop one of my kids, but I'll be listening.
Excellent. Thank you, Heather. Does anyone have any questions regarding that before Heather has to jump off and drive kids?
I still have 5 minutes before I go, so.
If there's nothing, I don't see anyone, I don't hear anyone. So great. Thank you for that update. And thank you everyone for being willing to move that forward in the agenda. Moving forward, I've actually asked our professionals if it's okay to move correspondence ahead, because often it's relevant to some of our discussion. And I know this is the second meeting in a row that we've slid where that lands in the agenda. So I think just so everyone knows, moving forward, I think we'll speak to correspondence early because it's often relevant to our discussion, and it's nice to either be able to ask questions or comments on that correspondence prior to the discussion. Okay, so moving forward, you should have all received the March 4th Concord Middle School Building Committee meeting minutes. Does anyone have any questions, changes, edits to that, and or motions?
Dawn?
Yes.
I'd like
Court.
to note, thank you. I'd like to note on page 2, it references, quote, court booth questioned the base design itself on the treetop design, which was the recommendation that was the favorite before the pause, and if the committee is wedded to the design. I'm not going to request necessarily a change to the minutes, but I want to note that I explained why I put that forth, and it was because a year ago, that was predicated on the statement that the design didn't have cost or sustainability implications different than any other design. So I would want that noted, at least verbally at this meeting.
Okay, thank you for that. Anything else from any other members?
And that implies that, you know, that's a question out there for me.
Mm-hmm. It's still a question. Yeah.
Well, yeah, does this indeed have no cost or sustainability implications for the project as opposed to other designs? Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Anything else from anyone? If not, does anyone have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Frank. Any seconds?
Second?
Thank you, Chris. Okay, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, I will, so the motion's to accept the minutes with Court's comment, and Stephen Crane, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jared? Did we
Yes.
lose Jared? Thank you. Matt?
Johnson, yes.
Matt Johnson, I'm sorry. I told myself when I went to I was trying to save time, to be honest, just going to first names. And I was like, remember the names that there are multiples. Sorry, Matt. So you were Matt Johnson. You were a yes, I heard. Lori Hunter?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
John Harris?
Yes.
Russ?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Court?
Yes.
Heather Bout?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Matt Root?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Great. Okay, so with that, I think Pat is going to speak to item number 3 regarding where we are in subcommittees and project team business.
So is there any subcommittee or project team business that any of the subcommittees need to raise at this point in the agenda?
Well, I don't know if the design subcommittee needs to raise anything per se, but we should report that we did meet on Tuesday. And we looked at a concept whereby a 6,000-foot gym could be pushed out on the property in order to produce a total of, well, excuse me, it was 6, then 7. The new concept showed 13. So again, it was just pushing it out further toward the street. And we saw a very, what should I say, uplifting and informative presentation of the other pieces of the building that we're familiar with.
Okay, thank you, Court. I just want to note that maybe not for discussion today, but going forward, the roles of the subcommittees as we go into schematic design. I think that's something that that I would like to hear from from Hill and from SMMA, how we can make the best use of subcommittees going on as we move into schematic design. I don't think that's a discussion point today, but I just want to note that's on our mind.
Is there a direction that you have in mind there, or?
No, I think noting that we're going into schematic design, we're moving out of feasibility. And from my experience, not having done a lot with subcommittees on a building committee, I'm just curious to know if there's ways that our subcommittees can be most effective and most helpful to SMMA and Hill as we go forward.
Well, I hope that includes perhaps a review of the function and the value of the subcommittees to date. I think that would be a useful part of that conversation, Pat.
I'll just jump in, Pat. There's no update from sustainability. I think our plan in schematic design is just to start to dive more into some of the details and ask questions to the design team.
Okay.
And I'll give a quick update before I turn my camera off. We have our next public forum, community forum officially scheduled for March 31st. And the announcement for that will be going out today. You should all get it in your email because you're part of one of our distribution lists. And so once you get it, please forward it to everybody you know and help us spread the word.
Great.
There's more going on, but I'll leave that as my update for now. That's the big highlight.
Great. Thank you, Heather.
Sure.
So that's it for that agenda item. We'd be moving on to the project schedule, which would be a Hill presentation. So Hill, you want to take over for project schedule?
Sure. Thank you. Kristen's running the presentation here. So here we go. So we started going over this schedule at the last meeting and kind of ran out of time here. So we can certainly go back through the high points, but just wanted to open it up more for discussion and feedback today as we look at these two different scenarios. And again, we could have come up with more scenarios, but just wanted to lay out two paths forward here. The first one, again, being no early release of design phases, so kind of letting things run their course. So looking at where we are now, we're in feasibility and kind of the restart phase here. We're going to be switching into schematic design in the near future, leading up to a special town meeting. And again, December 10th is just a placeholder that we put in here for conversation purposes. And then this first schedule shows a 3-month gap between the town meeting and the election. which gives ample time to for people to kind of think about the vote and prepare for the vote. And then there would be a release of the design development and construction documents. There would be a bid and award period in Q2 of 2023, and an associated escalation with that at 9% for estimating planning purposes. We would have an 18-month construction schedule thereafter, followed by punch list and move-in. And so the school would be ready for move-in towards the end of March 2025. And so that's the longer schedule of the two. And then Schedule B here is an early release of some of the design elements to try and buy back some time and get the school open a little sooner here. So same concept for feasibility and schematic, except there's a bit of an overlap here that would allow for an early release of schematic design. And we can certainly get into the details of what that would look like over the next couple of weeks, because it's right in front of us here. But it has the same December 10th placeholder for a special town meeting. So I think the benefit of starting earlier is just completing the schematic design earlier and giving a little bit of a buffer between the end of schematic design and the town meeting. On the other schedule, it's kind of right up against that date. So no cushion there as far as meeting deadlines and deliverables. So it just kind of takes a little bit of pressure off. And you also have the Thanksgiving holiday there leading up to it. So, and then as far as the town election, there's kind of two scenarios laid out on this one is, having a town election immediately thereafter, or maintaining the town election on the 3-month window, but releasing the design at an earlier date, both of which allow you to release the design at an earlier date here, where a decision would be made to start DD and CD in December sometime. And I think there's probably a sweet spot between the December and March timeline here for an election. So that should be part of the discussion here is what feels right. It's somewhere in between likely. So we just need to determine where that needs to land. And then just running out the rest of the schedule, it's fairly the same, except it kind of pulls the bid process up to Q1, which would give you an 8% escalation instead of 9%, same construction duration, and then same punch list and move-in time frame, but it opens the building a little earlier, kind of mid-year 2025. So you get more benefit of the new facility in the year 2025. So with that, I think we can open up for discussion and talk through next steps here.
Thanks, Ian. I actually have a request. As I'm looking at this, I'm realizing I know the answer and I don't know that others do. As you lay this out in your bar graphic, is there any way to show and I'm not trying to tell you how to do a presentation, but show a little dollar sign or an indicator of when cost estimates occur throughout this? I just think that overlaying that information onto this and where those occur, which I know they're at the end of schematic, they're at the end of design development. There's a 60% CD and 90% CD. 100 is when you bid it. I just think it's, as we're graphically looking at durations of time, it's always nice as a check. And it just occurred to me, otherwise I would have suggested it during the draft, that, it's important for everyone to know kind of when we have those cost checks along the way. So that's kind of a general statement. Anytime we're looking at a duration, I'm realizing that that's, it's not necessarily relevant to the overall schedule, but it's relevant to know when those checks occur throughout the duration of these phases.
Sure. Yeah, we can absolutely add those milestones in. This was intended to be kind of high level executive summary type schedule.
I totally get it, Ian, and I'm not,
Trying not to put too
I
much
still take it
info
as criticism.
on
I'm
here.
just realizing that an overlay of that
Yeah, that's fine.
information is important. So,
Sure.
awesome.
Yep. We can add that.
I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any questions, concerns? Feel strongly one way or another?
Yeah, Don, Peter.
Hi, Peter. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Ian, I have a question about the two schedules. Besides the obvious that we get in the building 3 months earlier, we save a percentage the construction costs. What are the risks of compacting the schedule as you would see them?
I think some of the risk here is just the timing for the town meeting and town election, and not rushing that process, because it's a very important part of the process, and you want to make sure that you have buy-in from everyone, that everybody feels comfortable, that they really understand the full scope and impact of this project on the town. So that's really where you're buying your time is between the special town meeting and the town election. So again, that's just finding the right spot for the election following the town meeting. So I'd say the risk is rushing it and people not feeling comfortable and then the vote not passing for whatever reason. So that's definitely not the scenario that we want to be in. We want everybody to feel comfortable leading up to a vote.
Yeah, and I think the other risk, Peter, is that you're spending architectural dollars not knowing whether for sure the job is going ahead. So you're releasing schematic before a complete full decision from the committee, and then you're releasing the architect to continue with design development prior to knowing that there's going to be a job. So there's architectural dollars involved.
Yeah.
And just so I'm clear, the benefits are just the 1% and the 3 months. There's nothing else I'm missing.
No,
There are some other things in here. This is Charlie. If you look at design development, construction documents, this a month is shaved off that. The schematic design appears to be shaved. I guess my question would be, it would seem that scenario A came from somewhere. Option A came from someone's experience that had some notion of best practices. It's not a random schedule. And schedule B is something everybody wants to do. Everybody wants to do things faster, save money, get in quicker, and so forth. If you look at software projects just by comparison, that's my experience. You try to accelerate things, you end up spending more money to patch and fix problems. You add more people than you otherwise would have on board to move things along more quickly, and you make mistakes. Now, I will go back and say that we accelerated the existing project. I think everybody remembers that we voted for an accelerated process, and I think that it's safe to say that with respect to the schedule that we had at the outset, that might have been a little bit aggressive, regardless of COVID. That might have been a little aggressive. We might have gotten started before we had some of the pieces in place that we needed. So I would recommend some caution here in thinking about accelerating things. I think we all want to get it right, and I think we want to be careful. So I guess, I'd like to hear why scenario A, option A, is on the board in the first place, and the extent to which it's a best practice. You can tell me why I'm got the wrong view on this, but let's consider this carefully.
I think, Ian, I'll let you continue, but I don't think that A was a best practice. It was based upon when the town election dates were. We were in the past kind of struggling with those. We've had projects that after the town meeting, the election occurs very, very quickly. So it was based upon those dates. best practice could be either one.
But those dates have not been set yet, have they?
No, nothing's written in stone here. This is
I mean, the
some
select board,
placeholders.
the select board will determine those dates.
Yep.
Speaking of select board, Matt, I see you have your hand up. Do you have
Yes,
a
I
comment
had
relevant? Yep.
a couple questions to ask. So I think, looking at the two scenarios, especially with scenario B, where the town election doesn't happen until partway through design, development and construction documents. I'm just curious about not just the cost estimate, but the cash flow. I mean, at what point do we actually need the election to have occurred in order to bond and get the money to cover the expenses up until that point? And so I'm just curious, does this have enough, do we have enough money to get that far? So that's my first question.
Yeah. So as far as cash flow goes, the only money that's been allocated is the 1.5 million, which gets us through the schematic design. We actually have a cash flow as part of a presentation later on here that outlines that. There's around 800,000 that's been spent to date of that 1.5, and I think it's somewhere around 1.2 that's been committed. And then, what you would have to do is you would have to approve at least a portion of the design development to get started with it early. So you'd have to allocate monies for a portion of the design development or all of the design development, and have the architects start early prior to a vote. So that would be the risk there.
Okay, but so you're saying though that we'd have to go back to the well either way. It's just how much money we'd need to ask for. We're going to need more money.
That's right. It's just a matter of timing. So you either wait for a vote and then you say, okay, let's start, and here's the cost associated with design development, and you approve that, or you do it prior to the vote. Or you have it early and you do it after the vote. It's all a matter of timing.
And then these are both showing options for a special town election. I'm seeing March 10th of 2022, but I'd note that that's really, really close to our normal town election. I mean, it would only make sense, I think, if we were pushing out to a date like that we would just combine the election events. Is there some sort of drop dead date relative to March 10th here? Is it that prevents the schedule from being pulled in any further? Or?
From what I understand of the town process, and we collaborated with Stephen and his team, is that the election needs to happen within 90 days of the meeting.
I see.
So that was kind of the reason for the 3-month duration there.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. Well, as we get closer, we can probably finesse that, but it would be awfully awkward to have a special election and 2 weeks later have a town election. So then the third question is about, I assume this is all about a design bid build approach, and that if you were going to do a CM at risk, just given all the correspondence we had, what would this look like? And I know you can't just sort of point to a thing, but it would just be rough cut. What would change about the way this looks like, without having to go to individual dates and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a good point, because the schedules and the budget that we've developed to date have kind of assumed the design bid build just for conversation purposes. And obviously that's a discussion and a vote to occur today, the project delivery method. So if this were to switch over to CM at risk, you would have the CM contracted and involved during the design phases here. So somewhere during this design development CD timeline in the schedule, you'd get rid of the bid award period, and probably move up the construction, And so you would have your CM engaged early, construction starting a little earlier, and then that would be the impact there. So.
Can I say something unless
Yep.
Tim has a comment on that? You're still gonna have a bid period. You're still gonna have filed sub bids.
Sorry.
and
Yep. You're right.
And in a perfect world, you'd engage the CM as early as possible. And I would argue if that were the route, it would start at the beginning of design development after we have a real project, if you will, that has been approved by the town. And with construction moving up, that would imply early bid packages, which can be a benefit of a CM at risk project. But it's just that they're able to get into the ground potentially earlier. And I'm looking at the second one, March. And we can all look at our windows and see that the ground's still pretty hard right now. But spring is probably a good time. The option A, obviously, they could probably get in April that year. So just from a timing standpoint, often those are the things you get early bid packages on concrete and steel. And, in theory, the designer is still finishing the documents to get you to that bid period. Understanding that, structure at that point is set in stone, and you try to not move things around, which I would hope you wouldn't be that late in the game anyway. But those are
would
some.
that bid award kind of fit into what's currently where the gap area is in the schedule?
For the
CM at risk.
We're bringing in the CM at risk. And I would just say that the CM at risk allows you some more flexibility on schedule, but I wouldn't say that it really doesn't change the bid award schedule or the start of construction, unless you'd like to use it to do that.
Okay. And then the final thing was about just this schedule, of course, is only focused on move-in. There's still another school to tear down, and it has potential like environmental impacts on the students and stuff. I mean, I know that we reviewed that roughly before, but how does that fit in here?
You're right. This isn't shown on the schedule, so it would be a time period thereafter. So we could certainly add that.
But is the goal to do that like in the summertime or something where nobody's around, or how does that work?
It's not right now. It's not part of the charge of the project right now.
To take the existing building down, Sanborn? It's part of the project. That's a phase B.
I'm sorry. I was thinking of the other building.
Peabody isn't correct. Yeah.
Sorry.
So to take Sanborn down is kind of phase 2 or phase B, if you think about it. The new building's up and running. The students are going to go to school there. We take down Sanborn and finish the site work, which is and the balance of parking.
Yeah, and you could choose when you allow that to commence.
Right.
If you wanted to make that a phase where they cannot commence with any abatement and demo during the school year, you can set that for after. But that hasn't been reviewed.
Yeah, it's in the construction period.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Don, can I make this?
Yes.
Can I make a
Hi,
comment
Stephen.
about the financial component and the gap just quickly?
Please, sure.
Because I think to Matt, to your point, it's not cash flow necessarily. I mean, cash flow is, pay go, the town's bills day to day. It's more authorization. Do we have an authorization for funding to?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Advanced design development. And I think the thought was, we talked about this, what do they call them? The before days, the early days of the project. I think what we would look to do potentially is put an article on the special town meeting warrant for an appropriation, whether it's from the stabilization fund that's already been established or, free cash or some other source to continue design development. And so the same group of people that are voting on whether or not to move forward with the project would also then be voting to fund design development in advance of the election to ensure the tighter schedule. And so that's how I don't know if that's a guarantee of how that's going to play out, but I see that as one option to get additional funding to advance design development.
Yeah, the stabilization fund could really be key in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the stabilization fund. It doesn't have to be. It could be, like I said, it depends on how much we think we need at the time and, you know, a number of other factors, but ostensibly the same group of people that are showing up to vote, you know, will also support keeping the project moving. The other part of this is on the election. And I went back and forth on this with Hill especially, but there's a compelling argument on both sides of the thought that the election for the debt exclusion should be separate from a regular election, whether it's national or local. It should be a standalone, you know, I'm not saying it should be, but there are two compelling arguments that should either be a standalone ballot or incorporated into a local election. And so I think that that's something we're going to have to, you know, tease out as we go. But I do think there's compelling arguments on both sides of that.
I mean, I could see relative to a national election, but for a local election, it seems like it would always make sense to combine.
So I think it would be, oh, is there someone else?
Was someone trying to ask for?
That's okay. This is Heather. I don't have the visual cue, sorry, but I wanted to throw in a comment and I was trying to find when would be a good time. So I'll make it very quick, and it touches back on one of the very first comments on this timing question, which was around the value of having extra time to communicate to the community about what's going on and everything, make sure everybody's comfortable. Clearly that is my highest priority. And so I just wanted to throw out that regardless of the timing here, we will make that happen. So I just didn't want anybody to think, oh, we have to have the extra time to do communication, because, and without looking at, you know, without looking at the calendar right now and the timing, I have looked at it before, and I feel like either way, we'll do that. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you, Heather. She's already planning for it.
Yeah, right.
Great.
Now you know.
You're doing a great job, Heather. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Just want to make sure you know, we'll make it happen.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I appreciate the comment, because that's true. That's a non-issue in this. So her point is that in either of these scenarios, the communication will be widespread, and it will be, you know, across the town as far as communicating this to everyone.
Exactly.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions, comments?
I think that goes to kind of this is kind of a waterfall of questions in a way where the first question is really what town election date is comfortable for the building committee. Is it near or at the annual town meeting in the spring of 2022? Or is it possible to have them pretty tightly following the town meeting? If tightly following the town meeting, then you don't need early funding for design development through construction, because that would be giving you that right then. So if however there is no comfort for having the town election quickly following the town meeting, then the question becomes, are you comfortable with authorizing the design phase early start and making sure that there's funding available for that? So I think the first question to be answered is, how tightly can the election follow the town meeting?
And I have a question.
Please.
And I don't know if anybody remembers, what did we do for the high school, and does anybody remember for the other building projects? From my point of view, March 10th seems an awfully long ways from the town meeting to have a town election. So I'm just curious, does anyone remember what we did for the high school? It seemed like it was closer.
Stephen and Ian can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe actually Schedule A was based on the high school. There was a longer period.
There was a longer period?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, just seems like a big chunk of time. And is December 17th a magic number, or could we do it in January?
Not a magic number.
Do we come somewhere in between?
Yep, it can move around.
Okay.
Just to play.
It may not be that we're just talking about a 1 week gap. We could make it a 3-week gap or a, depending on where Christmas falls in that. But
Yeah, you could make it whatever you think is best. So it can slide out 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever you think is an appropriate time between town meeting and election.
I'll just speak to that for a moment, and I'm definitely not the smartest in the room as far as history in Concord and how things have historically been done since I've only been here 3 years. But in projects I've had, some of the most successful are fairly close because it's on everyone's mind and they're, they're raring to go. The flow of information and data leading up to town meeting, which you need a simple majority, right? You need a 51%. Do I have it backwards? Oh my God. You can tell it's been a long week. But leading up to town election and then the vote, I had one pass, last year that was a week. Basically a Tuesday was town meeting and then the next Tuesday was the vote. And the turnout was, has historically been pretty good on that. But I do recognize that Concord may be different and unique, and who needs to, be shared information. To Heather's point, as far as content and data regarding the project, is a huge project. There's a lot at stake here. So want to be sensitive to that, but I'm just sharing my experience, with other projects in my world.
Yeah, Don, I would echo that with Bill's experience too. It's been sooner rather than later for just those reasons. Everybody's familiar with it. It's a process with the meeting and the vote. So that doesn't mean it's necessarily not the right thing to delay it. That's our experience also.
Thank you, Peter.
So I think in the interest of time, we want to make sure that we hear any kind of questions that you have about this, understanding we don't need to make a decision on this in this meeting. We're looking for a decision hopefully in our next CMSBC meeting. So if everyone could take a moment and let us know what questions you have, what information you need in order to make that decision, then we can make sure that we have that for the next meeting. Otherwise, I think the key question will be, again, that distance between town meeting and town election, what the level of comfort is, and what we should target there. And then also the potential for an early design start in advance of town election. So we'll come back with those questions seeking an answer at the next meeting, but let us know if you have anything that isn't captured here that would be helpful in advance.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. So with that, it sounds like no one has any further comment. So be prepared to weigh in on that at the next meeting. We'll roll right into project and construction costs and assumptions that are being made and where we've landed and information on costs. So I'll turn that back over to Hill.
Thank you. So if any of you have gone to the MSBA website and poked around there, you can look at a ton of cost information about projects starting in 2009 all the way through the projections in 2023, 2024. So this chart here just kind of shows you the vast range of costs here. And obviously we're not too interested in historical data, but it's helpful. We're more interested in what the projections are for the future here. So you can see, 2021, 2022, 2023, as far as cost per square foot here, you're ranging in 21, below between 300 and 400 to 600 and $700 per square foot. 2022, you've got a range between 400 and 500 to all the way up to over $800 a square foot, and kind of similar projections for 2023, which is where we're going to be hopefully landing here with projections. So that gives you an idea of the differences here in cost per square foot. There's a big range. There's a lot of different projects out there. Excuse me. A lot of different levels of complexity, a lot of different size buildings, and just a lot of different factors that come into play when you're thinking about cost per square foot. So that's why there's such a big range on these. And what we have done as a project team is tried to zero in on comparable projects and use our experience in the projects that we're currently managing to help inform the cost per square foot. So if you want to go to the next slide, that's where we started getting into the analysis.
Hey, Ian, sorry to interrupt you. Kristen, would you go back one slide? I realize we look at this all the time, and I don't know that everyone does. I'm going to put the link in the chat for everyone to where this lives as a living document on the MSBA website. And they've changed it recently, like giving it updates. But when you hover over one of these little dots or X's are projects that didn't move forward, for the record. On the left, like I'm looking at all the orange dots. Those are completed projects. So those are like real numbers, finished products. The students are going to school there. The green line, that steps, is the MSBA and what their participation is, which is still at $333 a square foot. So you can see that the exponential cost of school construction is well beyond what their participation as a dollar per square foot number is, just for reference. So that's what that green line is. And when you go to this, and I'll put the link in a second in the chat, but when you hover over this, you can see the project name, you can see the designer, you can see like, is it an elementary school, middle school, high school, and the lines, it'll tell you what everything is. So it's actually a document that should be used sort of live, because the information is kind of when you hover over it or click on it. And then as you move into the blue from the orange, those are projects that are being designed or under construction, like all the little filled in squares versus the open squares versus the pluses. That all means something as far as where the project is in its design phase and or construction phase. So I just want to put that out there so that folks know, but you can see there's a pretty steep curve to that. And we're all following this closely, including the MSBA, but this is a pattern and a trend in school construction costs that is, concerning. You can see there's a project up over $800 a square foot right now. So I'm sure there's a reason for it. I don't know that project. I hope it's not one of mine.
We're actually working on it. It's the Carter,
I'm sure there's a reason. Yeah.
It's the Carter School in Boston.
Carter School. That's a unique project. Yeah,
it is. It's for kids with disabilities. So it's,
right. There's a lot of uniqueness there.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, Ian, to interrupt you but I wanted to let people know that don't look at this all the time and don't necessarily know what it means, that it's actually in some ways, this is a nice snapshot, but in some ways it's helpful to be able to hover and understand what some of these projects are. So I'll do that right now. And Ian, please keep going forward. Sorry to interrupt, but just wanted to provide some context.
No, thank you for that. That's helpful. It really is a great tool if you guys want to go and check it out. So getting into our analysis here, and we've expanded on it since we've released the target numbers here. So I'll go through the information on the left to kind of give you the background on the target numbers, and then show how that compares to other projects. This is all based off of schematic design estimates here. Across the board, except for ours, which we're not quite there yet. But just walking you through it here, our program is for a 700 student enrollment. We're at 142,995 on the gross square footage. We're assuming a spring March 2023 start. And you've got your OPM designer and cost estimator just for reference across the board here. So you can kind of go across the top and see how those compare with the other schools that we've looked at. So getting into the actual cost here, we've got the gross square footage, cost per square foot, which we developed based on kind of the average or the median, looking at these other schools that are comparable. And so that gives you the construction cost. You multiply out the gross square foot by the cost per square foot. We know from the estimates that AM Fogarty has done that they're estimating about 1.5 million for demo of the existing abatement and demo of the existing facility. They're estimating 7.5 for the site costs, and I think there's some caveats there that Kristen can get into. And then that gets you to the total direct cost at 58 million. And then everything thereafter is kind of the markups for where we're at in the process. So being that we're early on in the process, we're in the feasibility stage, the design contingency is at 12%, which is common practice here in the industry. The escalations at 8% is what we're projecting right now. GC is at 5, GR is at 2.5. No fees for permits. P&P bond at 2%, profit at 2.5%. And these are consistent with the AM Fogarty estimates that were done last year, these as far as these percentages go. So those total to the markups on the direct costs, which give you the total construction costs of just under 80 million. So when you look at that total construction cost by the gross square footage, you get the 559 per square foot. And we wanted to challenge the team a little more and kind of push for a lower cost here. So we rounded that down to 555 a square foot as a target. And so that's kind of where you get, that's where we came up with the 555 per square foot now. And again, that was informed by, the square foot cost for buildings across the board. Because we didn't, these, when you look at the demo and site costs, they kind of vary. So we wanted to take those factors out and look at purely the building costs across the board and come up with what we thought was a reasonable number for cost per square foot for the building. So you can kind of look at these different schools and see the range in student population and size of school and timelines that vary a bit here. But we were trying to select things that were most comparable to Concord. Also, sorry, let me move this out of the way. Can't get this. So you can see like some of the square foot cost difference here, 5.25 down to 366. And they vary somewhat in that, we put some ad reno projects in here just to show you the difference in cost for ad renos versus new construction and that sort of thing. So there's 9 different projects that we looked at in this analysis. I want to go to the next page, Kristen. These are the rest of the projects. Millbury, Shaw, Weymouth, Framingham, Somerset. So probably, and thank you, Don, for passing this along, because this wasn't one of our projects here, but one that's very similar in size and scope is the Somerset Middle School, which is a 2022 projected construction start. They're at 563 a square foot for construction costs. So we're really, really close to that number. And we think that's a really good comparable here. So
they go to town meeting this spring.
Yep.
And vote. So they're at the end of schematic, just for reference. Was that
So that
it,
gives-
Ian?
That's it. That kind of gives you a background of how we arrived at the numbers. I know there was a lot of questions surrounding, how we came up with the 555 per square foot and the 348 per square foot. So hopefully that was a good enough explanation to show you how we arrived there.
I have a couple comments. Kristen, would you go back 2 slides to that chart and kind of show where that 555 lands relative to, so all the projects in blue are either in construction or I'm sorry, in design, whether it's feasibility or being, design development and construction documents. So the 555 is like right at the, say, bottom third, right? So just for reference, that's where these are current projects that are either in feasibility and SD like we are, or construction documents. And I'm sorry, there's no chat function. I went to paste this charts link in and realized, I can't even, but you have it at the bottom. Good for you. I can't see it because I have a bar, but I just moved my bar. If you Google the MSBA and cost data, there's a live link on their webpage that says school construction cost chart, and that will take you to the live document. But I just thought it might be helpful to show where other projects relative to where we are, where they're coming in at cost per square foot right now. So Kristen, would you move forward again? One thing that might be interesting, a bunch of these are currently in construction or occupied. Do I understand that right? Like Braintree East is open.
Just open.
Finished in
That's
February.
Right.
Yep. Almost 3 years ago. So costs 3 years ago are somewhat relative in the whole scheme of where we are. These are all the ones I'm looking at look to all be under construction. They're finishing July 21, December. So Braintree South, did they finish or are they punching out?
That's start of construction.
Oh, that's start. I'm sorry. So that's start of construction. Yep. So these are, So the one that's finished is Braintree Middle School East, and then the others are about to start. Just breaking news, Dennis Yarmouth, that's one of my firm's middle school, that one in the middle there. It just bid on Tuesday and came in 10 million under. So it came in at, I don't know, 83 or 84 million. It's not my project, so I don't have the actual details, but it's 10 million under design bid build. And one thing I was noticing on here, it might be helpful to say if it's CMAR or design bid build, just for reference on these projects. I'm sure we could dig that up. And actually the MSBA chart, because I went to it when I was going to link it, it tells you if you hover over one of those little squares or pluses, it actually tells you if they've made that decision and who it is. So some of the projects that are in DD, for example, have a CM already, some of them, like Waltham High School as an example. Okay, and then did I have anything else? I think those were my only comments on this. So thank you for doing this. I assume others have questions and comments, so I'm going to look for others to speak now.
I do, but Matt had his little hand raised.
I have to go back to the participants. I closed that when I was looking for the chat. Thank you, Heather, for pointing that out. And yours is up as well. So Matt, yes, let's start with you and then we'll go to Heather. Thank you, Heather.
Sure. So a construction contingency is not broken out here. Where is it and how much is it?
So right now the construction contingency is so we have the design contingency. There's also what we don't have in here is any of the soft costs. So this is just geared towards a construction cost per square foot. So we have carried in this lump the design contingencies, which as you design, essentially what happens is the contingencies are rolled up into the actual cost per square foot as you progress along with the design. So the design contingency gets smaller and smaller and then kind of turns into a construction contingency. You progress along here. And then there's also an owner's contingency on the soft cost side that's carried outside of this construction budget, right?
So design contingency is considered like a hard cost. It's part of the project, but the construction contingency is a soft cost.
You have an owner's construction contingency. And then depending on the delivery method, if you go design bid build, you wouldn't have the construction contingency carried in the in the bid. So you would have all the contingency would be carried on the owner's side. If you went CM at risk, then you would have contingency carried, construction contingency carried in the GMP and the owner side. So you'd have kind of two buckets of contingency there. The CM's contingency and then the owner's contingency. So it depends on delivery method again. So that's.
Yeah.
And that right now, it's in the 1.25 multiplier is where your construction contingency lives along with the soft costs.
Okay. And then, so what do you have a sense of how much that is out of that multiplier?
Ian, were you all carrying 5%?
Usually that's close. So in the owner's soft costs, there would be a contingency somewhere around in that dollar, somewhere around 5%. I don't know I think that's basically what we have in there.
Yeah, I don't have the breakdown.
And then as far as the job goes, whoever the contractor is bidding the job on the cost of the project, and that's in their GMP. Just happens to be if there's a CM at risk, there'll actually be a line item that says that they've carried some extra money here for stuff they may have forgotten or go over on their cost. If it's a design bid build, that's built into their bid.
Yeah. So this would change. So if we were to go CM at risk, we would change the way the schedule's developed, and we would change the way that the budget is developed. We just need to pick one and show it one way or another. So we showed the design bid build for both options. But certainly, if the decision today is made to go CM at risk, we'll go back and we change these documents to reflect that.
Okay, and then could you go back to the chart? When I look at this chart, of course, it's quite frightening that even taking out that project that was mentioned earlier, the over $800 a square foot project as an outlier, because it sounds like it really shouldn't be considered an apples to apples comparison. Yeah. 555 still puts us, in a lower part of the range, and that's in 2022, not 2023. So I just wonder, is this like an estimate too aggressive given where things are right now in trends?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at 2023, there's a lot of similarities there as well. So we were, trying to use the data that we had available for projections in 2023. And one thing that is important is showing the escalation projection, which is 8%, which gets you out to the 2023 timeline. So these numbers in 2022, they've arrived at these costs by projecting, they have less escalation because they're starting sooner, right? These are projected to midpoint. The escalation is projected to midpoint in construction for these.
Yeah, but I guess that's what concerns me is that, we're building in a high escalation and we're still ending up at that 555, which is in that lower third. So it just seems pretty aggressive. I just think of Concord usually doesn't end up on the low end of any of these scales, with any project we do.
Yeah, I mean, again, it all depends on what you're getting for that number, right? So you'd have to really get into the details of each one of these schools and understand, exactly what you're getting for the size of the school, the finishes, the site conditions, and everything. So that is the challenge of trying to compare things that really aren't comparable across the board.
And so, Matt, that's why we did our best to kind of orient ourselves on this cost per square foot for the building cost, because over time you see that that's a lot more stable in a way. And because the chart is showing you the site and the markups and the different delivery methods and everything. So looking across here and then at Ian's roll up here, you can see that in terms of average cost for building only and median cost, were in the right place. So then we need to just layer on our site and our anticipated site costs and our anticipated markups. And we were using those that were provided by the professional cost estimators and the escalation that we're seeing on some of our current projects. So, so we did use all of the best, most current information that we have, but I think the chart is a little bit misleading. And actually, it's my understanding that the MSBA is going to break out 2 charts now to actually capture this cost per square foot building cost versus the site and total, because they're seeing that as being so varying that it is skewing perception and information. So the MSBA is tracking that same need to call out and focus on the building per cost per square foot because of the variability of what comes down here.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because the cost per square foot, if you look at those across the board, we are on the high end for the building cost per square foot, the 348.
Well, that begs the other question is, what are the assumptions about building materials? This is Charlie. What are the assumptions about building materials, finishes, HVAC, and so forth, or sustainability that are reflected in that 348 number?
So I think we've touched on them a little bit in the past. I mean, at a feasibility study level, we're not in the details yet, but we do believe that the 348 will capture the net zero ready with the VRF type HVAC system, not any of the more advanced, like the base goals of the sustainability subcommittee can be accommodated with that building cost per square foot. And then in terms of materials, I think Dawn's mentioned in prior meetings, we're not going to be looking at Italian tile, terrazzo, and so on. We're going to be looking at durable, typical materials. So.
And do those base goals include or reflect the easy code? Or is that too specific at this point?
So there's a whole conversation about easy code and that it's still evolving, but and our caveats about solar PV and the EV charging stations. But generally speaking, yes, we do. Most of the easy code goals align with what we've been tracking for sustainability based goals as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I follow up then? Matt's last question actually led very close to mine. And it has to do with the markup and contingency. I don't know if there's an escalation over time, but the markup from the 348 to the 555. And I think I might understand the answer now, but I want to make sure. When we're looking at the first set of numbers, the 348, we are in comparison to some others, lower than several others, lower than say Holyoke and Dennis Yarmouth. And then when you look at the final construction cost per square foot, we're higher than those. So we have more of a markup in there. And my question was going to be, where does that come from and how does that happen? So I think what I understood from what you were just saying is we are estimating that as a higher markup to be safe. Is that a summary of that, or am I misunderstanding?
I think there's 2 factors that change the cost per square foot when you look at it from a building per square foot and then a total construction cost per square foot. So one is going to be the site cost. So again, looking at demo and hazmat and site construction costs and seeing the, a little bit of variance there between the projects. So we're at 9 million in demo and site costs, and you can see some of the other comparisons here that are lower than that. Dennis Yarmouth being the closest. So then again, yes, the markups are different. We don't know exactly what they used for markups as far as similar markups. So yes, we made assumptions based off of AM Fogarty's estimates last year. And so these are specific to our project.
Okay.
Can I also say, and I'm not the design professional, I just play one in my day job. But the design contingency is 12% right now, which is $7 million. We're still designing this building. We literally don't even have like wall types established, right? We're just showing, you know, footprints on a test plan because it's feasibility. So these projects are all in a place where they're farther along and, you know, don't have that, because that design contingency goes down and down and down. The better your documents get, better as in more developed, because that's how the process works, right? Like we start with where we are and then we end up with really super detailed. And that's why you have those cost estimates that I asked Ian to include on his timeline, because those are critical, because at certain points you have a certain amount of information where they can better estimate what you're planning on. Right now, there's a ton of assumptions and feasibility that go into the drawings because they're just not developed yet. That's not how this process works. They're really early drawings. So that design contingency starts to shrink as the process goes along. And, you know, Kristen can speak to what that typically is, but just as a general concept, you know, until you have more information on the documents, they're going to say, well, they didn't actually detail how that, you know, column enclosure is going to look, but we're going to make some assumptions that they're going to want to close, you know, as an example, they're going to want to, you know, put something around that and close it off and not have an exposed column. So those are just examples of how the process moves along and gets more detailed and how that number goes down and the estimates, frankly, get more refined.
Okay, so part of it is contingency, and part of this, I think, relates to Matt's comment about, is 555 aggressive? And I'm trying to understand here, does our contingency make it more realistic at this point, and or was it all about site costs? So it sounds like it is a combination of the two. Just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. And
So we
I think it's
believe that the 555 to 559 range is achievable.
okay.
And with the sustainability goals in mind and a typical level of finish, nothing high end. And I don't think that's what's been communicated to us from the building committee to date, is not that you're aspiring to have a high end level of finish. So what I want to do, though, is a quick time check. I know Peter has a question, and so I think we should probably hear that quickly. And then I think, Ian, if you agree, we did a lot of analysis to support this. We feel comfortable with this. The only way that we can get to more information to provide to you is to continue with design. But the fact is, we feel comfortable with having your scope as we know it today captured in this cost. So, and then we'll just be needing to work with everyone very, very diligently along the way to make sure that we're only presenting you with the options that meet this budget, and also informing you about life cycle cost and maintenance and everything like that, and durability. So that's kind of what I would summarize the cost piece as. But I did want to, before we get to the question, perform a time check. We have 15 minutes left in the normal meeting. We have two other major agenda items, the design update and gym discussion correlated, and then also the CM versus DBB discussion. So Dawn, would it be appropriate to poll the members and make sure that we have until 9:30, or prioritize those two items?
Sure. Should we get to Peter's question first and then we'll take a poll? How's that sound? So we can close out this conversation on cost for today. It's a continued conversation. So Peter, did you have a comment or? Yep.
Thanks, Don.
Sure.
I had two questions. One was the same as Heather's, so I think that one's okay. But you had mentioned that you had a project that came in $10 million under budget recently. And it occurs to me, and this goes back to the schedule, and I just want people to think about it, that perhaps there's a window of opportunity as we talk about the different options on the scheduling, that because of the COVID and all of everything slowing down, that there'll be a window of opportunity where these projects may come in under that will quickly evaporate as the economy gets up to speed. I don't know how accurate that assessment is, but that's just my gut feeling. And it may be something we want to really take a look at when we talk about the schedule. And that's it. That's what I had.
Yeah, that's a good point. There, some of the trends we're seeing right now for hard bid, the design bid build, is that these are estimates, and then the numbers come in, and they've been coming in lower on design bid build, which is the trend right now. So, and we're talking millions of dollars lower, and we don't know how long that's going to last, right? So we've got kind of COVID scenario here right now and trending in 2021, and that might ride out for a little while, and by 2023 it might be different. So we're trying to make those projections and not plan for a $10 million savings in 2023. We're trying to plan for a scenario in which where we're estimating is where we're going to land, right?
I have two comments on that, and I have two projects that are $10 million under within the last few weeks. So, but it's worth noting, and we can bring this data through our professionals because I know they have access to it, everyone does, but the MSBA actually at the end of every calendar year goes through what's been bid, whether it's CM at risk or DBB, and what the estimates were and what the actual hard bid and or GMP was. Not and or the hard bid or the GMP was. So there's data out there that is pre-COVID, that is, sort of years in the making of trends in the industry. And I'm not saying that, I feel that, I'm just saying as a designer, I watch the trends, and every year I check at the December board meeting, what was estimated, what was put out for a GMP, and where did it land relative to it. So there's historic data. And part of that has to do with Kristen's comment that she made a meeting or two ago where the MSBA stopped giving incentive points for a long time. They were giving an additional incentive to go CMAR. And so a lot of projects did. So there was a trend, again, just speaking historically, a trend that a lot of projects went that route to get the additional 1%, which on a project like this is an additional $1 million. And now that's not there anymore. So folks are sort of not pushed in one direction or another. They're just making decisions based on what's best for the project, which is the right thing to do. So anyway, that's just data that could be presented if it were interesting to folks to kind of follow along what's been happening in the school construction industry, which is really unique. So that's my 2 cents on that. Lots of data, and the MSBA is super transparent, which is great because it allows us to follow these trends. Okay, unless anyone.
And I know we're moving on. Can I just say this was really, really helpful to those of us who don't have all this context. So thank you so much for putting all this together. Hugely helpful.
Good, thank you.
Agreed, thank you, Hill and SMMA, because I know you collaborated, so great job. Okay, so Paul, can folks stay on till 9:30 today? Do people have a hard stop? And I'm sorry, our meetings we should just book them for 2 hours at this point. There's so much information and data that needs to be presented, and it's all really important, and we don't want to feel rushed through things. So I appreciate folks kind of recognizing that we're in the heat of it right now. There's a lot of decisions to be made and important topics to discuss. So I appreciate everyone. Does anyone need to drop off or take off? Are we at risk of losing quorum? It doesn't appear so. So with that, Kristen, please move us forward.
So we have our partners from Ewing Cole here to perform a very compressed version of the design subcommittee slides that were presented on Tuesday. So there's a lot more information that anyone can access on the slides that were already on the website for Tuesday, as well as the recording. But we are going to do a very high level review, as our understanding is that it's really the CMSBC's goal to have a conversation around the gym size with this information. So we've tailored it to be high level on the concept updates for floor plan and site.
So Kristen, thank you very much. And thank you all for giving us a few minutes just to recap our meeting. We just wanted to, underscore the fact that, the foundational vision and early the educator vision is core to our design activity. There's a lot of discussion about schedule, cost, sustain, those kinds of things. But this is where we started with Concord's 21st century vision. We can go to the next. Out of that, we translated that into a number of project design goals. We initially presented this, so you can see March 23rd, but there are project goals relative to learning, the context, history, and environment. Again, we just want to underscore what's influencing and driving our design process. We go to the next. This is just a simple graphic program. It's a summary of the components within the building. As you can see, much of it is the pieces and program elements that we've been working with for a year or more. What we've done is highlighted those things that have been modifications just over the last couple of months in revisiting the program relative to the education plan. You'll see that we added the auditorium, which has 270 seats. With that, the cafetorium is now relieved of the need to act as a support a performance or other gathering space. So that's the cafeteria. The art room has been, the art suite has been reduced by one room. The chorus space is now included within the auditorium, and there's one fewer language room. But in the aggregate, you can see on the left-hand side, this is 143,000 gross square feet. It creates a 21st century middle school learning environment, estimated 90% utilization, and it achieves the education plan goals. So this is the program we're working with. We can go to the next, please. You'll remember that in our work together, and initially we put forward a number of organizational diagrams and how they would fit on the site, and those were evaluated and critiqued on a number of different criteria, including the extent to which it supported the education plan, the efficiency on the site. It included lots of other building and site data. We looked at footprint, we looked at extent of enclosure, we looked at potential for strong energy performance. We also looked at within the site design, the extent to which vehicular circulation and outdoor activity, so that includes athletics, recreation, outdoor learning, to which those components could also be interconnected and uninterrupted by vehicular circulation. As we worked, there was initially also a fifth option in here, but as we worked through this, option 3 was seen to be the strongest for a number of options, for a number of reasons, including solar orientation, building footprint, extent of enclosure. We can go to the next. So when the adjustments to the program came forward, we did go back and revisit the site holistically. We looked at a number of different options. We presented some of that analysis on Tuesday. We have not included it here, but this organization continued to be the strongest option. What you see on the top is the option 3 floor plan from June 18th, and what you see on the bottom are a few modifications to that, and they are modifications that include the program adjustments, but also tighten up the building in an effort to realize cost efficiency, site efficiency, improve sustainability and energy performance. So in the course of this process, we reduced the footprint by approximately 15%. We reduced the extent of enclosure by approximately 15%. And we accommodated the program, retained the support of a team's teaching approach. You can see on the left-hand side is this was dubbed the kind of town hall. So that incorporates the administrative suite, the auditorium, the gymnasium, the cafeteria, the media center. So all those common areas that are accessed by the entire student body. And then on the east side of the building is the teams and the off-team classrooms that are located there. We don't want to spend too much time, but we're still looking at site organization, how you access the building. So the service location is on the lower left there, and that feeds into the storage, which leads into the kitchen, which leads into the cafeteria. So we've retained all those, very strong organizational elements. In the middle of the diagram is a connector or a bridge, which is tied to the topography. And we'll show you a little bit as we get there. But this enables the landscape to kind of slide through the building, connect a strong connection to the natural landscape, which is on the south, and then the play areas and the parking, which is on the north. And we'll see that next. So if we go to the next, Kristen. This, I think, is the core of our the supporting data for today's discussion. We did test the building with a 7,000 square foot gym, which is on the top, and that's what we had just been working through. We also looked at the implications of incorporating a larger gymnasium. So it does increase the footprint of the building. I should say as well that our site design exercise is looking at a 15% maximum on the site coverage, and we're very conscious of that. We have both of the studies that we show you today fall within that 15% constraint. We can go to the next, please. Just like the building design goals, we have site design goals. These have been presented and kind of affirmed. But you can see that fourth bullet point is conform to the 15% impervious coverage. We want to make a strong connection to the natural landscape. That was right from the beginning. Design a project that supports the site's ecosystem, provide optimal solar orientation. So all of those things are in there and influencing our approach to building and site design. We can go to the next. So this is an overview of the existing site. From earlier diagrams, you may remember the option 3 was in this location. We've rotated it to improve solar orientation. It also pushes it slightly out of the highly treed area. The other thing that's really kind of a significant advancement in the design of the site is on the left-hand side of the diagram, which is west. So north is up and west is to the left. We have consolidated all of the vehicular circulation and parking in that area. And now all of the athletic fields, the outdoor recreation areas, the opportunity for outdoor classrooms all exist apart from that vehicular circulation, and allows students to access all of those spaces without crossing any vehicular traffic. You can see also in the middle of the building the diagram that shows how the natural landscape kind of flows underneath the building and makes connections between the landscape to the north and to the south. Go to the next, please. This is a simple massing model. It's really like a massing diagram, right? That shows the allocation of spaces and the impact on the form. So on the left-hand side, you can see that town hall kind of piece where the auditorium, gymnasium, cafeteria, media center. On the right-hand side, you can see the classrooms and teams, and then you can see how they are interconnected by this bridge, which allows the landscape to flow through the building and to the outside. There are outdoor learning possibilities on the north side of the education wing, and also on the south side of the building, within a more kind of naturalistic landscape. There is a opportunity for, well, what Kristen is pointing right now, that's kind of an outdoor classroom opportunity. There's also a plaza, which is on the west side of the building, which provides direct access to the outside from the cafeteria, from the media center, from the makerspace. And then finally, if we go to the next, this is just a little more detailed site plan that shows the placement of the building relative to the vehicular circulation. This allows for bus drop-off, for parent drop-off, for staff parking, for service access, for fire department access. And one thing about this diagram shows both the smaller and the larger gymnasium footprint overlaid on one another. And so we have developed a site plan which could accommodate either approach. So I'm cognizant of the time, and I know that we want to move forward. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I'm also happy just to leave this as the quick summary that Kristen outlined. And we can move forward, or Kristen, however you like to go next.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
think this is where we wanted to take a pause and let everyone know we were asked to come to test the larger gym footprint in addition to just updating the concepts based on the new program and everything. And so what we have arrived at is that even with the larger gym footprint, we are within the 15% footprint. So that means that from our prior meeting, we had discussed, will this have an impact on the educational spaces? Does anything need to be moved up or out? And at this time, the larger gym would purely be a funding decision, because we only have the 7,000 net square foot gym in the current $100 million project cost limit. So it's no longer a site and variance and fit decision. It is purely funding.
Kristen, can you speak to what the impervious percentage is with the increased gym footprint?
Yes, so I believe that we are at 14.7%.
So quite close to the
very,
15.
Very close.
Okay, thank you.
That works out to a delta of about 4,300 square feet.
Okay, that's good to know.
Wiggle room.
Great.
Very quickly say what we did to get this space. How did you accomplish this?
If Kristen, could you go back to that the earlier comparison of the previous footprint and this one? We did it in a number of ways. One is we tightened the envelope, and so if you look at the top diagram, you can see there's a little bit more of ins and outs on the exterior envelope. The building in this, in the top image, it's longer, it's a little less efficient relative to the envelope. So we pulled it together a little bit. We shortened the length of the bridge. And so we paid a lot of attention to the envelope. The other thing that we did is we put the world language classrooms on a mezzanine level, which sits over the top of the administrative and media center. We excluded that plan from this presentation for brevity, but that's what we did. We pulled things together. We made a more efficient building footprint, more efficient envelope, and we took use of introduced a mezzanine to be able to accommodate and offset the introduction of both the auditorium and the larger footprint. So yeah, thank you, Kristen, for going there. So that you can see where that mezzanine sits. It's beneficial to the overall massing of the building because the auditorium is a double height space, right? And so it gives us the opportunity to tuck that mezzanine in there. And also it's adjacent to what we envision as a double height kind of pre-function space, which is right that provides an entrance to the auditorium. So those are the moves we made in order to accomplish that. We had to relieve the ground plane of roughly equivalent footprint of the auditorium and expanded gym.
Thank you.
I just want to say, Keith, thank you. Great job presenting to the design subcommittee on Tuesday and also today, the condensed version. For those that are super interested in the design, and I hope everyone is, we can share the recording from Tuesday where Keith and his team, Seth and others, Mike and Kristen got deeper into a lot of these design ideas and how this plan has evolved based on the updated space template that was approved and the educational plan goals and objectives. So we can share that around. I don't think it's probably on the website yet. It was only 2 days ago. But anyway, we can share that link, and I hope folks go back and kind of listen to more, the uncondensed version, if you will. So thank you, Keith and team.
Thank you. Mhm.
So my understanding is that at this point, we are no longer constrained by the site to building a bigger gym. That was what we asked SMMA to show for us. We are constrained by budget. So we've gotten lots of feedback from the community about a desire for a larger gym. The 7,000 square foot gym meets the ed plan. I think that the discussion that has to happen at the school building committee is, where do we stand on how we feel about doing a bigger gym in the absence of any funding? What is, it's a messy discussion. So I'm just throwing it out there. The community wants a bigger gym. We have a gym that meets the ed plan. It's going to cost more money. We don't know where the money is going to come from. What do we do with this? I'd like to hear some thoughts. Peter, I know you have thoughts.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of questions, but I'm going to on the overall design, but I'm going to focus on the gym for right now. But I also want to ask a question about the auditorium. So we've also gotten a lot of response about the auditorium being smaller than the current one. And I know that a lot of effort was put in. My question is there any way, let's just say for discussion purposes that we exceeded the 15%. Is there any way to also expand the auditorium to meet that need? I'm really worried about looking at, like, we're favoring one side of a community over another, and want that to at least get out there. As far as the auditorium goes, my thoughts are this, is that the community is going to be paying a lot of money for this building regardless. And yes, we want to focus on the ed plan, but I think to miss an opportunity to build this right for the community in it and put that space in that is going to be well used, we know it, that it is something that, I was looking at $3 million, if that's what the price tag is for it, that's $25 a year for the average taxpayer, roughly. So I think that you would have broad support on this for people who have children in school, but people who also don't have, for the adult rec department. I've talked to them. They said they would utilize the space well when they could. There's lots of reasons why I think this makes sense for the community. I realize it's outside the actual education, but remember, the entire community is paying for this building. So my thought is it makes sense to move forward, and especially given that we can accommodate it within the footprint. So I'm gonna stop there and let others jump in.
So I want to help by guiding a few of those points. I think right now the larger gym fits within the footprint. The larger auditorium would definitely push us over the 15%, as you mentioned. I would be hesitant to proceed with that without going back to town staff and saying this is a really compelling case being made, and what would the variance process look like. And I'm not sure if they would be willing to commit or comment on that at this time. I do know from what we've heard about the high school that it was tough. But I think the larger question for me would be also the parking, because right now you saw the site plan includes 134 spaces, I believe, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. And if we're looking to increase the gym size to 2 courts in play, I think that 134 spaces can certainly accommodate spectators for the limited number of spectators we've heard would use the gym in those instances, as they'd be mostly competition. But the auditorium, if we were to go to a 2 grade level seated auditorium, for example, and we had looked at 550 in the past, 550 seats, with 134 parking spaces. I think that would be a challenge. So once you increase the parking, let me go back and share my screen. You can see, you know, if we're talking about twice as many spaces to get to, say, 260, that's half the number of seats, then you'd have to be looking at this area of coverage on parking. And Mike, definitely, as my site lead, jump in here, but I would love to know everyone's thoughts on parking, because that could end up affecting the Fields program.
Also affect the way we drop off and pick up with the buses as well.
Correct. Yeah, the whole site design would have to be rethought, because right now it does have that access where the students come off and come in via this walkway. If you pushed the buses farther out or split the parking, there'd be a lot to look at for the team if we were to increase the parking. But I would like to know about the count of providing, say, 550 seats, but only a third of that in parking.
What do we have now for parking there?
Mike, do you know?
134.
Yeah, that 134, that includes 6 spaces for the vans, and that includes six accessible parking spaces.
Was the question, though, about the existing Sanborn parking lot, not about the proposed plan?
I apologize. I don't have that number in front of me. I'm sorry.
We're talking about staff parking or total combined parking?
Total combined.
I believe there's 70 spots.
Yeah.
That sounds really familiar, Justin.
So what I'm hearing is Peter has raised the question of adding auditorium to the gym discussion. Kristen has raised some of the challenges with adding auditorium to the gym discussion. In the interest of time, I'd like to make sure everybody has a chance to kind of weigh in on this messy discussion.
A question, if I may. Is there a timetable on this decision? Are we going to rush something today or at the next meeting? What are the committee's thoughts on that? It is a critical decision.
That's a great question.
And we've created this issue because we chose to be quite ambitious about how we interpreted the ed plan, and quite unique about how we calculate utilization of the design that we have right now. So this is a difficult set of questions that we've seen coming.
I wonder if I wonder, Kristen, if you could comment on kind of what kind of time we would have to make either the gym or the auditorium or both decisions, so we know kind of what those constraints are.
In either case, I would highly encourage you to be making the decision before we enter schematic design. As you saw with the location of the gym, in theory, we could work with a design that is expandable, where you could kick the can down the road to the end of schematic and decide at that time. But there would be major impacts to it. It would put a lot of pressure on the design team to create something flexible for a would-be case and not really a confirmed case. So the gym, I think, would have a little bit more leeway if there was truly a desire to push it out as far as possible. But I think the auditorium, with its location in the floor plan, we would absolutely need to know that before we enter schematic design, also with its potential impact to the parking count and the variance. As right now, where we stand is the larger gym is within the variance limit. And so, you know, we at least know that that won't be a barrier or something additional to overcome. And the parking also is less of a concern. But again, that auditorium piece with the variance in parking concerns, I think we would need to really work on getting that decision by the end of feasibility, which right now we're saying, you saw Ian's schedules. The release for schematic design could be as late as May 20th, I think is where we had it in the elongated schedule. So, but all of that being said, I would encourage everyone to try to arrive at the decision for both by May 20th, because it will just be it will give you a better project, and kicking the can down the road, I don't think will help in the conversation.
Could we also, Pat, consider timing for a decision on the timetable itself, which we've discussed, but we haven't discussed how we're going to conclude that conversation?
So specifically, we have, I believe, 3 more CMSBC meetings planned. And so the question is, what information do you need in order to make this decision? I know Heather has discussed a community survey. I know that we have a community forum coming up, but and then you all have, you know, you all are getting inputs from the community through the emails and through this meeting. So the question is, what information do you need and how in order to make your decision?
Part of the messiness of this for me is, even if we decide we have a few months to figure this out, I still don't understand how it gets funded. And I don't understand what our process is. And I don't understand completely who needs to be involved. I mean, in some ways, I feel like this is not our decision so much as it would be the town's decision. And by the town, I guess I mean select board or FinCom, as to whether or not we want to go back and ask for more money for this project, or if the town wants to support funding this project. So I don't know, Stephen, if you have a comment on that, or.
Yeah, I did actually. You were almost reading my mind, Pat. What I was going to do was frame the decision or the question in a different way. First of all, I do think this is a full committee discussion. Because our job is to make a recommendation to the select board, and by extension, the townspeople, town meeting voters, and then town voters. For the duration of this enterprise that we've been on, the commitment, my recollection is that the commitment of the full committee has been to work on a recommended feasibility study concept or design that was within the $100 million project budget, which meant an $80 million construction budget. And so I think, to me, it's another one of those things where there are many compelling arguments about why there should be a larger auditorium or a larger gym. And there are many compelling arguments why, you know, what the community benefits of those would be. I'm not really contesting any of that. I think we've spent a lot of time talking about the prioritization of the education plan and making sure that it is a middle school first and foremost. And so the way I was going to recast the question was, do we, now that we're getting feedback from the community about the gym and the auditorium, or any other building aspect, do we now want to change the committee's approach to recommend a building to the town that is not within the budget? And I'm not saying that in an inflammatory way. It's a pretty straight ahead pragmatic thing. It's clear from the work that's already been done that the expansion of the gym and the expansion of the auditorium, individually or together, certainly will be beyond the current planned budget. And so I guess it's somewhat rhetorical, but if we say, yes, we want to pursue those, that is the decision, then is to go beyond the budget. And I just, so Pat, I guess for your purposes, that's something that I do think that that's this committee's job to decide if we want to change approach. Like I said, it's been 12 months of doing it, with it, focusing on being within the budget. It would be a philosophical shift of the committee, but I do see that there are bona fide reasons to at least consider it.
Can I comment on that? I think that's really helpful the way you just framed it, Stephen. As Kristen mentioned, we have been working on a draft of a community survey. And one of the big questions, it's still in draft form because we're trying to figure out what exactly are we asking here, but I think this could inform it. We are probably pretty close to being able to put out a community survey, and we could specifically address this question. Obviously, it's not a survey is not a referendum, but it gives us information. Anecdotally, I actually have been hearing from several people recently, particularly in the past few weeks, saying, please do this project right. To keep it to an arbitrary number of 100 million. 100 million sounds big, and so it feels like a big hurdle to cross. And it's what we talked about from the beginning. But I've heard several people saying, please don't stick to just an arbitrary number and shave off things that would be very valuable to the town, that the town would probably be willing to pay, 103 instead of 100 if we do it right. Again, that's not saying that's the whole community perception, but I have heard that feedback several times recently. And I think that does mean it's worth a look at least at that question, and maybe trying to get this survey out really quickly. The other note that I would quickly mention is we have heard from some people recently who may be interested in fundraising. And I've been doing some research on how that would work and whether there could be private funding to add to this. So that's not to say that all of a sudden, don't worry, we have private funding here, because we don't know for sure. But that could be a possibility. So I just wanted to throw those things out there. And if this committee thinks that we want to launch this survey as quickly as possible, I will get it out there as quickly as possible.
I just want to chime in again, and I've been through a bunch of these projects with the town, from Willard to the Fields project to the high school, and I totally get what you're saying, Stephen, about the 100 million. But I think the community, what they really want, is a building that is built with the community in mind, that is built the best way we can build it, and then being a very fiscally aware and fiscally prudent, but not to cut corners. When we built the high school, we spent $4 million something on a gym that was on a second gym, and the community came back later and said, why did we do that? It was a waste of money. We should have spent a little bit more and done it right. We should have done some other things with the high school project and done it right. So I think that's, to me, the lessons I've carried away from living in this town a long time is do it right, do it well, tend to it, but don't, I'd much rather have a building that costs 101 or 102, if that's what it takes to do it right, versus 100. And then we come back and say, we have a lot of people saying, I wish I had done this, I wish I had done that. I'm not saying we make it to alcohol at all. We'd be very fiscally prudent, but this is the most expensive project. Let's do this thing right for the community's sake.
I just want to make sure, Frank, I think you had your hand up. Did you have something? Yeah.
And the question I have, we've discussed all kinds of things about this building. The minute we blow this building up and make it bigger and everything, the maintenance of this building down the line gets bigger too. So you have to think about that too.
So Pat, if I just could follow up, because Peter, I hear you, but I think my comment was not really about the community's wishes. Everyone on the screen is more qualified to judge those than I. What I'm saying is, from a committee dynamic standpoint, you know, it's moving in that direction is a significant change. And I just wanted to highlight that from a committee standpoint. And I think some of that, if the committee says we hear the community and we should be making that shift, then we should have that messy conversation and move in that direction. But I think as a committee, we have to sort that out, just from a process standpoint, Peter. So it's not, you know, it's not an evaluation of the community's needs or mindset, to be honest with you. I think you're right. I think there's a fair number of voters who would say, you know, geez, for an extra 2%, we get something that's really great. Why wouldn't we do that? But we haven't taken that. In fact, we've talked about maybe scaling back the budget because of feedback that we're getting from other members of the community that don't want to see the budget exceeded, that want to see a building that is more cost effective because they are concerned about the impact of tax bills. And so I think there's big weight on both sides of this, and we are the fulcrum of that decision point. So I think it's, like I said, I just want to make sure it's clear. This is about how we are conducting our business as a committee.
I'd like to ask a question, fairly simple one. Maybe Kristen has the answer. Based on the cost data that was presented today, maybe we should get everybody on the same page with respect to what the second full-size gym really would add in the way of cost. You can do the numbers, but pretty straightforward. It's 9,000 square feet. If you take 6 and you gross it up, it's 9,000 additional gross square feet. Well, what would the new number be? Is it 1%, Kristen, or is it more like 5 or 6%?
So we did run those numbers based on your feedback in the last meeting, and using the $555 per square foot construction cost, it's just shy of $5 million in construction cost. And at this time, we'd also advise you to carry the 1.25 multiplier for project cost just as a budget until more information is gathered. But yeah, you would be in the, applying the 1.25, you'd be at 6.2 million. So somewhere in the $5 to $6.2 million range for the added 6,000 net square feet.
So what we're saying is we went to the town and said 80 to 100 million. And we're coming back and saying, well, we really need 5 or 6% more. It's not like 1 or 2% more. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. I would also remind everybody on the auditorium that the initial sizing and the initial requirements from the school administration were for a cafetorium. So we have gone the extra mile here. We've added a full auditorium, although it may not be 350 or 550 seats. We moved from a cafetorium to an auditorium. So that was a net add. And we also increased the size of the gym from 6,000 to 7,000. So we really have added not only a full-size, court, regulation court, but we added an additional perimeter for a better run out and so forth. So we have a pretty classy single court arrangement. It's not 2 courts, but it's more than what we have today. I don't believe today either of those 2 schools has a regulation court. So we're providing one additional regulation court to the town that the town did not have before. I'm not saying this is the right thing to do. I'm just saying that those are some of the facts about the situation and some context that might be helpful.
So I think that Stephen has posed a question to the committee. And I think the question is, what would be the committee's appetite or approach? What would the committee think about going back to the town outside of our $100 million budget in order to accommodate some of the community feedback that we've gotten? Understanding that, well, not understanding, but so my question is, what are the risks involved in doing that? Do we think about do we think that this could jeopardize the success of the middle school project? Or do we think that it's within the appetite of the town to say, yeah, we'll do both? That might have been a messy way to say it, but I'm kind of into messy today. So anybody help me out, Matt? I'd be particularly interested in sort of someone from the Board of Selectmen's point of view, or, other members of the committee.
Well, I think you stated it. We do add risk when we add cost. As Charlie said, the town is holding a figure of 80 to 100. We've landed on 100 very, very delicately. Really had to engineer it carefully to do just that. So yeah, we do put it at political risk. And how to quantify that, I don't know, Pat. That depends on advocacy groups that materialize, and ultimately votes at town meeting and an election.
Court, if we could, I think there's also the possibility that the 555 number is low, in which case you not only have you added 5 or 6 million to add a gym, but if your number is off, then you've really eliminated a little bit of headroom in terms of how people are going to think about this. So, I think that we should try to see it from both sides.
Yeah.
Well, Kristen did just tell us that she felt confident in that number, and I know there is contingency built in. But given what you're both saying, I'm going to come back and say more than just I'm willing to send out this survey soon, but say I feel strongly that we need to. I think this is a question that we need community feedback on. Yes, we've heard feedback that people don't want it to go too high, but we've also heard feedback that, to Peter's point, we don't want to short sell this either. I think we need to get that feedback, and I will weigh in right now on the side that I do feel like we need to do it right. And the 80 to 100 is something that, just to put it out there, we all discussed at the beginning of this building committee being created, but it was not a range that was in front of the town when we voted to move forward with this phase at town meeting. So the 100 million is a number that we've created. It's not one that the town gave us. Just wanted to clarify that.
So looking at the time, I have to jump in again. And I think that we should, process-wise, our next CMSBC meeting wasn't going to be until April 15th because we were thinking there might be more evolution of concepts. But I think the conversation is not at a subcommittee level by the sounds of it, it's here. And it's about the project cost. And so what I would advise is that we perhaps put a placeholder out for an April 1st, 2 weeks from today, an April 1st building committee meeting, and that we have some very clear marching orders for everyone, such as the survey going out, potential follow-up with FinCom or the select board. So if we could kind of create what we'd like to do within that 2 weeks, and then also if everyone is available on April 1st, I think that would be the prudent discussion right now.
Kristen, could we also get, prior to that, sort of an assessment of the reality of if we tried to enlarge the auditorium? Because it sounds like we could be in a situation where we say, yeah, we'll go to up to 120 million, but we can't really do the auditorium because then we'd be eliminating half of the fields. I feel like we need more information about, is it even possible to do the auditorium?
I'll absolutely take that as a design team responsibility. Just with Hill together, we would work on putting together what the costs are for each of the components, what the scope might be. It would just be a memo format. We won't be doing updated floor plans or site plans, but.
I think that would be helpful. And also just to the point of timing. Oh, sorry, Court, I didn't mean to cut in. Just on the timing piece, if we're looking at April 1st, do we want community feedback by then? I'm not sure that it's realistic to get a survey out and collect all answers and have that information for us within 2 weeks, just in terms of giving people time to fill out the survey, promote it, and collect the answers. Would it make more sense to make it 3 weeks out and we could try to run a survey and get all the information from it and then have that information to discuss when we all meet again?
And there's a community meeting the 31st, right? I heard you correctly. That's the night before the 1st?
The night before, which wouldn't give us a lot of time to kind of process that and move forward. So again, not to play with our calendar here, but if we made it 3 weeks out, I feel like maybe we could have more of an informed discussion.
Heather, would this committee see a survey before other citizens saw it?
So right now, the communications subcommittee has been looking at it. If the full committee wants to see it, I can certainly share it. I want to be careful that we don't create, too many revs of something that we never get it out if too many people have feedback. But I'm happy to share it with this committee first. And if they're, and give you 24 hours to share any major concerns or something like that.
I think
Does
it's
that seem
important.
fair?
I think it's important this committee knows how it's being presented to the community because a survey does represent us.
Sure, absolutely.
So am I also hearing that we need to get on the agenda of the FinCom and the Select Board this question?
Sorry, Pat, we're on the agenda for FinCom April 13th. I've been going back and forth with the chair, just confirming on our end that people were available. I had an email, I see Mary, hello. I had an email back to her last night just saying, that's a Tuesday, not a Thursday. Just want to make sure we are all available, but I just wanted to confirm that week that it's Tuesday.
Well, I don't know if this is a presentation from us, and Stephen, maybe you can help me with this, or Matt, as much as it's just getting a sense from the FinCom and the Select Board how they might react to
conversation, Pat, rather than a.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I don't think it needs
so-
a full presentation, but okay, so Stephen.
So I think I can tee up the discussion at this next select board meeting through my liaison report. So basically I'll say that this is, an issue that the committee is working through. And then perhaps on our subsequent select board meeting, we could have an agenda item to discuss that. And I don't think that we would make a formal vote, but you would get a sense of the board perhaps.
I think I think that might be the best we could hope for, but any other thoughts?
I think that's great, Matt. Thank you for offering to do that.
I'm seeing that Mary Hartman of the FinCom turned on her camera. I don't know if you're getting our attention, Mary, or not.
Thank you. Don and I have spoken, and we are planning, actually, I think we're planning on having a conversation with the FinCom before the schematic design is initiated. So yes, and I think that, again, it will be a sense of where the FinCom is relative to this.
And that's still planned on the 13th, Mary, Tuesday?
No, I don't know, Don. This is kind of in flux right now.
Okay.
But we will talk before that.
Very good.
And again, it will be a sense. But while I've got you, can I make a comment? And I'll wait until public comment. Do you have time for public comment?
Give us 1 minute to get through the timing on this, Mary, and we'll come back to you on public comment. And I'm sorry, we've definitely gone over today, so thank you for your patience. So I'm sorry, I just muted myself in the middle of talking. Sounds like we're looking potentially at would that be the 8th then, April 8th? 3 weeks from now, in order to circulate the questionnaire, the community questionnaire amongst this group, get feedback within a quick time frame, 24 hours, get it out to the community, promote it, get feedback, digest that feedback. Meanwhile, we have a community forum on the 31st, which we will elicit feedback on that particular topic. And then also in the meantime, have a discussion with both the select boards and FinCom in town. Is everyone in agreement that that's next steps on this? And then we come back on the 8th with all of that information and data and feedback and everything, and then have a broader discussion on how to move forward with what's next.
And I want us to be very clear that we're not setting the expectation with the community that we are considering this alternative. We are looking for input from our select board and our finance committee and the community on where they might fall in this, to just inform our discussion. But I don't want this to go out as, oh, now they're considering the gym and the auditorium. if people follow me.
That's a good point, Pat. And I guess I'd look to Mary as a follow-up, if we could have that discussion, if you guys could make time for us at some point before the 8th so that we can come together as a group with collected information. That would be most helpful. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot. And
So you're talking, Dawn, are you talking to me?
I am,
Okay.
yeah, as far as, because the 13th, I think was
I hear
intended
you.
to be an update.
I hear you.
This is a conversation specific to the larger gym and auditorium.
I hear you, and I'm grateful to you for asking for our input, and I will put it on the March 25th agenda and move and defer some things we had on that. So if March 25th works for you. Because this is important, this is probably, as we know, this is the largest project the town has ever done. So it's important to us. So March 25th.
And as Matt has said, Matt's going to bring this up at the select board meeting. I don't know that we need to be there for that conversation with the select board. I don't know that we need to be there with that conversation with the FinCom.
It always helps to have someone I'd love to have, one of the chairs.
Okay,
I'll
absolutely.
tend to be at both.
It's just
And
very,
Matt,
very helpful that if the board has questions, it's just very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. So Mary, the 25th is next Thursday.
Yes.
I just checked my calendar. I've got a meeting until 6 or so, 6:30. But you guys meet at 7. Is that correct? So it would be post 7 p.m. And
Yep.
if so, I can be certainly available. And then Matt, was your suggestion for this coming Monday or just to plant the seed Monday and then have the
I'll plant the seed
conversation
on Monday. We would have the discussion the following.
the following? Okay.
I'm can't speak for the chair, but that's where
Sure.
I would hope.
That would be your suggestion. Got it. I just want to make sure I'm available on those particular days, as well as others, Pat and Lori and Stephen, and anyone else who wants to attend.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So clarity on that. We're going to shoot for a April 8th meeting here, 7:30, to continue this piece of the conversation. Unfortunately, given that we're already 15 minutes over, I suspect we have to punt the construction delivery method discussion and vote as well. I apologize for anyone that's been listening and or waiting for that discussion. Clearly, there's been a lot to talk about today, and I look forward to hearing thoughts from the committee members on that discussion as well. We've received some communication, I guess, in the 3 weeks leading up to this. We may hear more, or if folks have questions about that in order to inform the discussion, please ask or share ahead of time so we can come to that discussion. We, as in our professionals in the room, come prepared with answers, so that if you have a really clear question about something, it may make sense to prompt ahead of that meeting, so then we can come, having addressed issues and questions so that we can be strategic and expedite, not in the form of getting through something quickly, but in the form of having answers directly rather than having to come back with answers, if that makes sense. Okay, with that, I'm sorry to have to punt that conversation, but it's 9:45 and we still need to take public comment. So if everyone's okay, I'm going to move to that agenda item.
Can I just ask, we haven't heard from a number of the people on the committee. We've sort of laid out a plan. I just want to see that there's a consensus that this plan is comfortable for the rest of the people on the committee. Is there anybody who's not comfortable with this?
I don't want to add time here, but I would love to see some guiding facts for the public on this survey in terms of like what the additional cost of the auditorium, of the gymnasium, the impacts to parking. I mean, I think at a high level, everyone would love a bigger gym and a bigger auditorium, but it's these details that impact everything that folks who are responding to that survey also need to be aware of.
Well said.
Thank you, Matt. And to others, if you have other thoughts or suggestions on what you want to see in this, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And I will obviously not be able to necessarily incorporate everybody's wishes if they're contradictory, but I will gather all that information and incorporate as much as I can.
And so for Kristen, that is something that we would be looking for not only the survey, but also for the conversations with the select board and the FinCom.
Definitely.
All right, okay. Nobody else has anything they want to say about this, then yeah, let's go to public comment.
Mary,
I'm going to.
I see your hand up.
I'm good. In the interest of time, I'll reserve my comments for later, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation at the FinCom, and that's when I'll be talking. So you can pass over me.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Mary. Look forward to that. Others, I see Tracy turned on her camera. Hi, Tracy.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you state your name and your address for the record, please?
Yep, Tracy Morano, 39 Partridge Lane. I really appreciate you looking at the auditorium and the gymnasium space, because I do think this is a community building. And for the town to support a community building, it needs to be kind of welcoming to the community. I do just want to mention that the theater, you know, obviously I've spoken to you before, and the theater is very important, but that space is also used for music and for chorus, and it's a performance space, which is a curricular item, specifically in the auditorium. And currently, I think we have about 350 seats there. So, you know, I've heard feedback from people that just say, can we at least have what we have? And not even necessarily expanding it, but, you know, any consideration I think is important for the theater kids, for the music kids, for the community to use the space. So I appreciate the survey. And I think that a lot of people don't even really know what's going on right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and you know, you've obviously been working hard on this, but I think that the community needs to give some feedback. So thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. David? No, you're muted.
It can wait in the interest of time.
I appreciate that, David. Thank you. And thank you for sticking through this very long meeting with us, and Tracy as well, and Mary and others. Is there anyone else? I'm looking for
Dean
any.
has got his hand up, and Alexa. Dean?
Okay. Dean, please. Good morning.
Good morning. I'll be brief. I want to commend the committee for the work that they've done to get to the point that they're at. I know that there's further conversations that seem to be going on, but I want to just remind the committee that we're building a building for the schools, and we're not building a performing arts center, and we're not building a rec center. We're building a school. And in doing its work, the building committee has engaged with the community to the degree that it has recognized the need for an auditorium, which is outside of any MSBA standard. It has recognized the need of the community for a full-size MIAA-sized gym, which the schools did not push for. A 6,000 square foot gym was a satisfactory result, but now with the design, we've amended it to add 1,000 square feet and get a full-size MIAA gym. So I think that the committee has engaged with these community needs, but to push further and get beyond that to a larger auditorium, which would generate more parking and generate other kinds of neighbor congestion, to get to a rec center level gym with parallel full-size courts. I think it's a bridge too far. In my view, it is pushing the budget beyond what it was envisioned to be, and it pushes the building beyond what it was originally intended to be. So that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you. And was there one other, Pat? You saw the hands, but I didn't. Alexa.
And I'm sure I look crazy. I'm never known for being brief, but I will try my best. So I am obviously on the school committee. Sometimes I think people don't realize that the school committee is not the building committee. So I have received like more phone calls in the past month than I would have ever thought for someone that doesn't sit on this committee. I've sort of pushed these people towards Heather as on the communications committee, but and Heather did bring this up, but I have to say, just because it's my firsthand experience, I've gotten more calls than I ever thought about the people who've been expressing the exact sentiment that Heather expressed, which is, please don't underbuild this building. I remember when I moved back to Concord. I think I was like 24. And I remember going to the town meetings with respect to the high school. It was like one of my first civic engagements. Anyway, and it was all, sort of young people. And I think that I think it was actually to Peter's point, there is a huge sentiment. All those people rallied to support this building. And then there were parts of it that were a letdown. And I think it's that constituency of people who's been here since we were really young, and now we're sort of firmly middle-aged, who've seen this process go through and just don't want to see that mistake made a second time. And I think, I don't know, it'll be interesting. So I do think the survey's worth it. That's all. Again, I'm always long-winded. I try to be so succinct. It never works.
That's okay, Alexa. For the record, could you come back and tell us where you are?
Alexa Anderson, 14 Park Lane.
Thank you. I know we're all trying to be quick, so. And thank you for that comment. And please, as you hear from folks, please encourage them to come either to our meetings or reach out to us directly. We want to hear from them as well, but I appreciate that they're reaching out to you. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, anyone else? If not, I'm going to try and get everyone to work on with their daily lives, if that's okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Stephen.
Second.
Okay, whoever seconded that, thank you for, all right, we'll do a roll call. Stephen?
Yes.
Jared? Not with us anymore, maybe? Matt Johnson?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
John Harris?
Yes.
Russ Hughes?
Russ
maybe-
had to go. We had a.
Yep, that's okay. All right, no problem. Kate?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Court?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes, and thank you for all this.
Thank you. Frank?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Matt Root?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you again for sticking through this. And it sounds like we're going to see everyone in 3 weeks. And thanks, everyone. So much work went into these conversations.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-
I'm a
bye,
yes too for
everyone.
the record, everybody.
Thank
See you.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.